Hello, ghouls and goblins. It's October. You know what that means. We're gonna get a little bit spooky again.
Oh.
I don't know anything about what we're talking about, but it's gonna be scary. Haunted dolls. Don't like that.
Yep, that's that episode title, Haunted Dolls. Do you like
And
dolls?
I don't like. No.
No?
Well, that's not true. I like action figures.
Those are dolls. They could haunt you. I don't think there's a rule to what can be haunted as a doll. But maybe I guess we could talk. They're generally pretty creepy.
Right.
What do you know about haunted dolls?
I know Annabelle. I
Uh-huh.
know Chucky.
Uh-huh.
I know that
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, that's what most people know, I think. It's about the two general ones, right? It's pretty like regular, I guess, for ghosts to like move and throw objects. We know that stuff, right? But
Right, yeah.
people also get like possessed by ghosts, kind of like demons, right? Like ghosts
Yeah.
kind of go inside people allegedly and possess them for short periods of time to speak through them or like just do something, I don't know, yell at someone. But
Right.
sometimes they also possess objects. That's that's where the dolls thing comes from. The possessed dolls. It's ghost haunted dolls.
I mean, it makes sense to possess a doll too because they're humanoid, so you can walk around and move stuff and grab. It's a practical choice, to be honest.
yeah, it's a
and it's creepy
familiar
and small.
familiar shape, I guess.
Yeah.
That is correct. My thing was I had the wrong thing on. Anyway, so the it's it's pretty common for things to be possessed
Right.
after someone dies, and it's not just an object. Sometimes it's an area, like a house.
Right.
But
That's like Phasma.
The spirit of a person can like be attached to like something they're attached, like their pocket watch, for example, their flask, their toy doll, maybe a little toy doll,
It was their favorite thing growing up. It meant a lot to them.
If you have an attachment to something, it's likely that when you die, or when that person dies, that the ghost, especially if they're near the item, will be connected to it. Sometimes the object has to be close to the body of the person. Sometimes the object doesn't have to be, and it can just be like wherever it goes, the spirit goes with it. There's a lot of stories of things being like going overseas, for example. We kind of mentioned it. I don't know what episode it was. We kind of mentioned there's a lot of like America and I think it was last episode. America and like the UK, for example. There's a lot of stories of jinn possessing people because we have people carry objects that are possessed, that are being haunted by this creature over to our country. So haunted dolls are similar to that in most cases. They're just they're like the home to a spirit that is being aggressive. And the two you mentioned, I even wrote down in my notes, are the two most commonly known ones. Annabelle, of course, from the movie franchise, and then Chucky from the movie franchise Child's Play.
Right. Well, I'm glad that I fulfilled your list.
Yeah. So while that movie may not be based on a real event, Annabelle also is as loosely based on a real event as you possibly could be. But the Child's Play is purely fictional. Tonight we're going to go over three very famous haunted dolls and tell their story and where they're at today, what they're up to, what they're all about. Are they real? Maybe,
No.
go into that stuff.
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it's a bit more believable to me than a lot of other things.
Right. Well, yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, which
I have
we'll,
stuff to say.
We'll get into. So, we're going to start today with, of course, the most famous one that we've already mentioned, and that would be Annabelle. So, Annabelle, which I'm also going to bring a picture up if you're watching the live stream or the VOD of the stream, there is a picture of the doll. All three dolls are going to have pictures of. Annabelle, we did talk about
that.
in the Amityville. We did talk about Annabelle a little bit in the Amityville episode. And so now we're going to go fully into this story. So sometime in the mid 20th century, a Raggedy Ann doll was made that would be packaged and sold to a middle-aged woman as a gift for her daughter. The daughter would not be a child, but a 28-year-old woman named Donna, or Deidre, according to some people. There's
Maybe a nickname?
Yeah, I think Donna is actually the short name for Deidre in this case, from what I could gather.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so she was a nurse at the time, and she grew up with a single mother and was rather poor, which led to her not having a doll as a kid. But she always wanted a Raggedy Ann style doll because she would see it in windows and like stuff like that. And your friends had it, so she wanted one, right?
It was a famous thing for sure.
They're very famous. So on her 28th birthday, she would get her first Raggedy Ann doll as a gift from her mother. Obviously, it was just kind of like a sentimental gift. It wasn't like, here's a toy to play with, you 28-year-old nurse. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, remember you always wanted one? Yeah. I got one kind of thing. So she was so happy about it. She apparently was brought to tears by the gift.
That's very sweet. Great story.
Yeah, so kind of like how you mentioned, she didn't want to use it as a plaything, but it had a lot of sentiment behind it, and it made it a great gift. And she would bring it home to her apartment that night, which she shared with another young woman from her job, who was another nurse named Angie. And she would place the doll on the sofa as like a cute little decoration accessory for the house, right? So it would like live amongst the sofa pillows in the house, on the couch. And when people entered the home who were visiting, they often noticed the doll immediately because it kind of was facing the door, and they liked it. They said it was great to have this like little happy Raggedy Ann doll smile to walk into, you know? Like, it's a cute little thing. Mm-hmm. But before too long, something strange was noticed. The doll would be often found on the floor face down or in a different room. And when Donna would ask Angie, Angie always said, "No, I never touched the doll," which made sense because they often worked the same shift. So they were always at work together, and no one was at their house, so there was no one to move the doll.
That's weird.
They would often find it face down on the floor in the living room, the kitchen, or Donna's room, and sometimes on Donna's bed. A common incident would be Donna coming home to work with her door being the only closed door in the home because they kept them all open. And so her door would be closed, and when opening it up, the doll would be sitting on her bed looking at the door.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, already a little weird.
I don't think that's a good thing.
And yes, an important thing I want to bring up is they were just the two of them living in an apartment, and there was no pets. So we just
because it could be a dog picking it up, playing with it. Sure. Nope, not this time. Okay.
After a short while, they would start finding bits of parchment around the house, often with the words like "help me" written on them. The two did not have parchment paper, so they don't know where these parchment paper bits were coming from. And these disturbing notes would be found in anywhere from the kitchen to the living room to the bedroom.
It's probably a creepy landlord.
Or someone living in your walls, because there's stories of that happening that bother the fuck out of me.
Yeah, I've heard them.
One day, Angie would be at the apartment with her boyfriend, Lou, while Donna was at work. And after a period of time, they started hearing rustling noises, which evolved into what sounded like loud searching noises coming from Donna's room, which again had the door closed, but neither of them said they closed it.
Good.
So Donna was at work, so because this Lou thought someone was breaking into their apartment, so he grabbed like a bat, or it says he grabbed a stick, so I'm assuming it's a bat, went to the door to get ready to fight off an intruder in the room. And when he opened the door, he saw nothing, but the room was a complete mess, and the doll face first on the floor. Soon after that event, he started experiencing a burning pain in his chest, and when he opened his shirt, it was revealed to have 3 large claw marks on it. Some versions of the story say that he was sleeping after this, and when he woke up to a dream of the doll attacking him, that's when he noticed the claw marks in his chest.
So he may have done it himself in like a panic in his sleep?
Yeah, well, it's just either... Some versions of the story say that when he opened the door, he felt it and like immediately felt what this burning pain in his chest was. And some say that night when he was sleeping on the couch in the apartment because he stayed over that night, he woke up to a dream, a nightmare of being attacked by the doll and had the marks in his chest.
Right.
So yeah, could have been either that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That could have been like a self-inflicted thing while sleeping, because of a nightmare.
Yeah. I've twitched and done shit like that, you know. Yeah. I've accidentally cut myself while sleeping with a sharp nail,
For sure. After this event, the girls decided enough was enough, and they wanted answers, so they would invite a medium over to the apartment to do a seance, which the medium volunteered to do. The seance was allegedly a success, and as they would contact a spirit that resides inside the doll. The spirit the medium contacted said their name was Annabelle Higgins, and they were a young girl who had been found years earlier on that site in the building that this would end up being built on. So, a body of a young girl was found on that lot, and this building was built on top of it, and allegedly her ghost was living in the doll. That's what this medium came up with.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
The medium claimed the spirit was benevolent, however, and wanted it to be loved and cared for, so the two young nurses felt bad for the spirit and decided to keep the doll and take care of her, and verbally consented to the spirit to inhabit the doll. And this is when things got a lot worse and a lot more weird.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it's kind of not. It's I wouldn't trust a ghost. Anyway,
Yeah, no.
soon after that, the parchment notes appeared more frequently, almost daily. Objects would be found broken, and doors would be slamming inside the apartment. Reports vary on the frequency of the type of events that took place, but it got bad enough that the girls would be over it only in a couple of weeks after the seance, and they would decide that the spirit needed to be removed, and the doll would keep showing back up at their home if they tried to remove it.
That sucks. That's not fun.
There's even a story of them throwing it out the window and then coming back and then getting food, and when they came back, it was sitting on the couch again.
Oh,
So, weird.
the landlord, I'm telling you.
They would contact an episcopal priest. Episcopal, as I say it. It just means Anglican.
Oh, got it.
A priest known as Father Hagen. Realizing this was above his pay grade, he got his boss, Father Cook, involved. Realizing this was above his pay grade, he got two people that we love so much, that I personally love so much, and we've talked about my love for them, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We've talked about these guys.
We've talked about them, and that was sarcasm, because I despise the Warrens. The church called in two self-proclaimed demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and now that the Warrens are involved, everything gets extremely more sketchy and unbelievable.
Right.
Even everything we've gone over from this point comes mostly from the mouth of the Warrens, with only a few other accounts, which is what I tried to base this off of, with anything they didn't say. So everything we just went over could also just entirely be false by either just, people wanting to sound like they knew it was happening, claiming they knew these girls, and just listening to the Warren story. If you want to know more about the Warrens and why I despise them so, listen to our past Amityville horror episode, because I'm not going to do a Warrens chapter on this one like I did on that one. But I went over their whole story in that episode. So the Warrens, of course, claimed it was no ghost, but a demon. And they stated that the behaviors exhibited the signs of a demon to the T, with three things. One was the behavior of teleportation, with the doll moving around the house without actually moving. Manifestation, the parchment paper that the woman did not own appearing with writing on it. And finally, the mark of the beast. The three claw marks that Lou had suffered were a mocking of the Holy Trinity.
That's very good embellishment and projection.
Great detective work. At their behest, Father Cook would arrive at the apartment to begin an exorcism on the doll. Now, of course, we don't know anything about this because that was private. The Warrens were not even allowed to witness it. And after the exorcism, the Warrens were told the women told the women that they would take Annabelle away from them in case anything remained, which the women volunteered to take the thing away. They would strap the doll in the back seat of their car in case they had any kind of power in it still, and allegedly it did, according to the Warrens, because on the drive back to their home, their brakes failed multiple times. They decided to avoid main highways in case the doll's power would cause any accidents, but even on the back roads, they got into multiple almost fatal crashes. When the brakes failed, Lorraine stated by spritzing holy water on Annabelle, the car started working again.
I fought it, and we won. I want to play a video game of this sequence.
I'm surprised there's not like a Warren's game about the Conjuring and like Annabelle and all that kind of shit like that, because they could.
Yeah.
Back home with the Warrens, the doll would be placed in Ed Warren's study. And of course the Warrens, in their private home, as they were the only ones to witness it, saw some crazy intense activity coming from Annabelle, including that it would fly and levitate around the house, knocking things over and in front of them, and evading capture as it levitated towards the roof level of the home.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just they saw that. It didn't happen before the exorcism. Nope. It didn't happen. No one ever said anything about it flying. Just they did. They even say that they locked Annabelle in a room outside the home in a side building, and it would then show right back up in Ed's study.
Do you think they like just dropped acid and then stared at it? You know what I mean? And then they're like, this is happening. Whoa!
Acid for Jesus.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, acid for Jesus. If you want to connect with God, then you got to see him.
Yeah, you got to see him. You got to see the ghosts around you too, and the demons and how they interact with things,
and the flying dolls.
So they decided they needed to keep the doll locked down for good and had a special box made for her. The box was made with wood and had a glass cover on front that you could see inside of it. And the box would be inscribed with the Lord's Prayer and St. Michael's Prayer and have a sign under it that said, "Warning, positively do not open." If you look at the picture I have up on the screen, that is the box.
It's got the cross on the top. It looks like it has a seal like they do in like Japanese lore or culture.
Oh, no, 100% does. That they do that in Christian culture.
Like,
Christian myth does it too. That they seal things with holy symbols.
Sure.
Yeah. So with seal with the holy symbol, not only that, but Ed would continue to visit the box throughout the rest of his lifetime to recite a prayer of binding to make sure that the seal would stay shut.
All right.
Since the doll was locked up, it has not been seen to move around once. The doll will be put in the Warrens Occult Museum where it sits today. You can go visit it if you want. This would not be the end of incidents involving Annabelle, however. Once a priest was visiting the museum and discounted the abilities of the doll. He even held the doll after he mocked it, despite warnings from the Warrens to let it be. On the way home, he would get into a near-fatal car crash, totaling his car, and he recalled seeing Annabelle in the rearview mirror right before the accident.
Wow. That's spooky.
Years later, another visitor to the museum laughed about how silly the idea of an evil doll was alongside his girlfriend, and when they would leave the museum on a motorcycle to head home, the motorcycle would fail and turn off the road into a tree, where the driver was instantly killed and the girlfriend barely survived. She claimed at the time of the accident they had both brought up the doll again and were laughing about it. For years, the Warrens recounted these tales to visitors to the museum, including multiple media outlets such as horror or paranormal magazines, websites, or even news networks. The problem, however, is none of these would ever have their names divulged of any of the people involved, so they could never be asked about it. And none of the stories could ever be corroborated. So, they probably made it up.
Womp womp. Yeah, no, it all sounds right. Especially like, it almost sounds like the young boyfriend and girlfriend coming in. What a stupid doll. That's not real. Fast forward to the next scene. They get in an accident and dies.
They died.
It sounds so like an 80s horror movie script. Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So again, it's all really spooky and it's great like fun.
Yeah.
But
so people, including myself, we tried to look up any of these incidents. There's just too many. There's too many men and women on a motorcycle getting into a crash into a tree in the area. There's too many priests totaling their cars over the last 25 years in the area, let alone the last 30 years or 40 years.
Right.
So there's too many. It's impossible to know. Going further down the rabbit hole, you'll discover that the entire story from the beginning comes from the mouths of the Warrens, like I mentioned earlier, so it could entirely be fabricated. There's a doll that they bought or found. There is others who were friends of Donna and Angie who did corroborate the events happening in their households, up to the events of Lou being clawed. That comes solely from the Warrens' side of things.
That does sound like the first big that's an intense thing to happen, as getting injured.
Yeah. So my thought on that is that I think that there may have been some kind of minor haunting involving the building and the doll. Maybe it was moving around the house like a creepy ghost thing, if you believe in that kind of thing. But what I think it was, that was the extent of it. And then when things got weird, they got they tried to get a church involved, who ended up calling the Warrens, and then they came to the house, and they're like, oh, this is a good thing to exploit. So they just took it home and did
hey,
that,
we'll make money on this. Yeah.
Father Cook and Hagen that we talked about that did the exorcism, they're real. They did do an exorcism on the doll, but they never spoke about the exorcism again. After the event, they never talked about it and refused to mention it. They're both passed away
that's
now,
a sign of trauma.
as are the Warrens. They're all dead. So it's unlikely we'll ever get more information on the true history of Annabelle.
Yeah,
Basically, everyone involved has passed away.
It makes a great story.
Yeah. And yeah, it mentions it as I mentioned before, it does still reside in the Warren Occult Museum. So if you're ever over, I think it's in Massachusetts. If you're ever over there, you could go visit and see Annabelle. Annabelle did make waves, however, in 2014. The reason that you know it and most other people know it is the James Wan movie trilogy called Annabelle that came out. Most people don't know it's based on a real story. They think it's just a movie. But it is very loosely based. There's almost nothing connected. But the movies did prove successful, and they brought a lot of attention to the doll, including tourism to the Warren Museum. Major differences, including that in the movie, if you have seen it, you probably, and looking at the stream or looking at pictures of Annabelle the doll in real life, notice that it does not look like the movie at all. And that is because in the movie, it is not a Raggedy Ann doll, it is a porcelain doll. To look a bit more real and like twisted.
Yeah, and also maybe copyright.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It might have been started off of a copyright thing, because I think the Raggedy Ann doll is more creepy because it's so innocent and childlike.
Oh, right, yeah. Like I don't feel that. The only reason why that picture is creepy that you posted on the stream is just because it's in a box with like seals and crosses all over it.
Yeah, but
like,
seeing the Raggedy Ann doll doing demonic things, I think would be a bit more horrifying than a porcelain doll. You know what I mean? Like it's got that innocence feature to it. They could even do a cool scene where its smile turns into a frown.
Oh no!
Also, in the movie, it like goes around in a whole like city block terrorizing people. It joins a satanic cult and like disguises itself in a robe, or none of that stuff happened. That's all just crazy movie stuff. In 2020, again, Annabelle was in the news though. And the reason but the real doll, not the movies. And the reason was the Warren Occult Museum had been closed temporarily in 2019 due to zoning issues.
Oh, okay.
And during this time, there was rumors spread around that Annabelle had gotten out and gone missing.
Uh-oh, skedios.
So in response to this, the caretaker of the museum, Tony Spera, who is actually the husband of the Warrens, of the late Warren's daughter, Judy, who is the caretaker of the museum and, in charge of Annabelle, posted a video of YouTube showing himself with Annabelle still in the box, proving that the doll was still there and never got out, and it was just, wild rumors online. But he did make sure in that video to remind us all that it's super evil and dangerous and kills people, telling the story of the priest and the motorcycle driver again, and telling us that we should visit the museum and pay the entry fee to check it out.
Hey, look, free advertisement, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, that's the end of Annabelle. What do you think?
I mean, the early stories sound the most believable because it's a lot of subtlety. It's like some noise, things are knocked over, the doll seemed to move a couple times. Like it's very small, subtle horror, and then you're once the Warrens take over, it's just no, people are getting scratched and people are dying in motorcycle accidents. It's like okay, pump the brakes here.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
I don't believe it's a haunted doll at all. I think it's purely fabricated. Yeah. Anything the Warrens touch, I don't believe. And they're trying to sell tourism and trying to sell tickets to their museum and trying to sell books about it.
Right? Because they're the type of people that really sort of because there might be truth to some of these things that we're talking about, like the paranormal and all that, and because of them, it's just so much less likely. Yeah. To be believed or to be actually studied in any real way.
Yeah, they're just the biggest. They're the biggest shysters, basically, the paranormal community, charlatans, if you will. And some people still just believe them. People believe anything they say, and it bothers me. And like I mentioned in the previous Amityville episode, the people who actually investigated them said that Lorraine Warren was a nice old lady with crazy stories, and her response was you need to take faith in mind and not listen to the truth all the time. It's what is that supposed to fucking mean? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. That's
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 good.
stupid.
Good.
That's what the
Good.
church says.
Yeah, exactly. And they're definitely were church people. So that was it for Annabelle. We're gonna go into our second one. Luckily, none of the last $2 we're gonna talk about don't have anything to do with the Warrens, so I believe them a lot
Great.
more. This second one is probably the other most famous. Going in order. We're going in order from most famous to least famous. And the second
that's
one
fine.
we're talking about is Robert the Doll. You know who Robert the Doll is?
I don't, but I'm excited to find it. I know Roald Dahl.
I brought the picture of Robert the Doll up on the stream. I recommend Googling Robert the Doll yourself if you want to check out what he
Oh, I
looks like.
hate him. He looks like he looks like a World War II Navy sailor.
Earlier, World War One actually, and
Oh, my bad.
I hate it. I hate this doll. I think he's very creepy. He's probably the creepiest haunted doll I've ever seen.
He's got a little doggy though. His dog is
Yeah,
cute.
the dog is also kind of terrifying. I actually I think it's very funny. I wrote it. The dog. One of the articles I used to learn about Robert the Doll was from allthat'sinteresting.com, which is a great site for like weird little stories about things like this.
That's cool.
And they described the dog as looking unhinged, which I think is a very apt description. It looks like it's seen
that's
some
good.
shit. It's
I was gonna say it looks like something that like your aunt who's been into crafts for the last year made you for no reason.
yeah, like it looks like
Like,
a
look
solid.
what I
It looks like
made
a solidly made thing, but not something you'd probably really sell in a store, maybe. Like,
Yeah, like again, it looks definitely like
Homemade?
crazy craft
yeah,
aunt.
it looks homemade.
Like
I don't think it is, but it's old. It's old as hell. All right, so Robert the Doll. We're gonna go down to the sunny state of Florida that we all love so much.
it's too humid.
I thought you said too human at first. I was like, that's so real. But
Yeah, hashtag deep. No, humid. He fucked the humidity.
humid. It is very humid. Not good for dolls like this that are made of this kind of material.
No.
So
True.
we're going to look into a lesser known but still very famous doll known as Robert. This doll is a bit different in the way that it actually has a known, documented, and verified history with lots of witnesses and people.
Oh, okay.
And it's not involved in any Warren style of investigation or like demonologist, like no church involvement, none of that. So it's all people who've seen it do things, a lot of stuff like that, which we're going to talk about. So let's get into the history of this. Robert is a 116-year-old doll. He's stuffed entirely with straw. He's known to be haunted by an unknown malevolent spirit to this day. The doll is fully straw stuffed, which shows its age. That's not something you would ever do nowadays.
Yeah.
And its body is made with a homemade fabric covering for like the skin, which is if you look at the pictures of it, you can see like the holes all over its like face and stuff. It's just because it's the same homemade fabric, and it's just being damaged by age and movement, and the straw inside of it, I'm sure, is full of insects and stuff that are eating through the fabric. So like,
Right.
its face has also been bloated and warped, apparently, from its original look. We don't have photos of it from 116 years ago. So,
Sure.
but people have said it didn't look like this always. It got like bloated and warped with time and probably humidity and the straw inside of it and stuff. So it looks pretty horrifying. It's often accompanied by its own doll, a small teddy bear-like dog with a weird look about it, like I mentioned, the little unhinged dog. So this doll has a full history, and its original owner was named Robert Eugene Otto, who was a young boy at the time, who was gifted this doll by his grandfather in 1904. Local legend states that it wasn't his grandfather at all, but actually one of the wealthy family's servants who put a hex on the doll to curse the family and the boy for their mistreatment of the servants. There's nothing but local legend to back that up. No one knows anything about their servants, what happened to them, if they even had any, really. So, unknown. But they were a wealthy family. The historians at the museum did look into this doll and where it came from, however. And one of these things is they found out it's not even a doll at all. It's actually a mannequin made by the Steiff Company, the same company that made the teddy bear, as a window display for young boys' clothing.
Oh, I did just look it up, and it actually looks a lot bigger than a typical doll.
Oh yeah,
Like, it looks
no.
taller.
So the clothes that it's wearing in the photos, the sailor outfit, is actually the owner, Robert Eugene Otto, the kid's clothes that he would wear around as a kid, like as a costume, like a sailor outfit. And there's pictures of the kid of him as a kid in those clothes. You can actually see like that is like a 4-year-old like clothing outfit. So
Right. So that's a pretty big doll. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's small.
yeah, it's pretty big. And it's it was a mannequin for young like toddlers clothes, like what
makes sense.
ages 3 to 5 years old clothes. And somehow or another the grandfather probably got it or was told it was a doll, gave it to the little boy, and that became the boy's thing.
I mean, that would have been a cool toy for back then. Like, look at this giant doll.
Yeah, look
It's
how
like,
big it
whoa.
is. It's another person.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but as far as that, what we do know for sure is that in 1904 it was gifted to the young Robert, who for the rest of this episode we're going to refer to as Otto, because
Okay.
Robert is the name of the doll. So we're going to be calling Robert the doll Robert and the kid Otto and the doll Otto when we get to him.
Okay.
His last name was Otto, so he's just going to be known as Otto.
Got it.
So to avoid
enough.
confusion. So Otto was obsessed with the doll and carried it with him everywhere. And Otto was known to be a rather different quote-unquote boy by the adults around him. His whole life would be described as quote-unquote eccentric.
Okay.
He probably was gay. And
Okay.
they just didn't like saying it back then. You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
That's
He's different.
yeah, there is
he's
looking into him, you'll see so many things about that. Like, yeah, he sure is a strange one. He dresses really nice, like that kind of stuff. It's just like, okay, gotcha. Well, and again, we can make some assumptions based on censorship that he wasn't like the standard man of the early 1900s, you know?
Right.
Otto would name the doll after himself, Robert, an honor that he thought was great as a child, and he would carry Robert with him everywhere he went. Corey Convertito, who is the current curator of the Fort East Martello Museum, where Robert resides today, is quoted on their relationship as such. He says, "What people really remember is what they would probably term as an unhealthy relationship with the doll. He talked about it in the first person as if it wasn't a doll. He was Robert, and he means a live entity."
Oh. It almost sounds like the Babadook situation where it's not alive and then he wished it to be alive and it came.
Yeah, that is a theory. It is. There is a tulpa theory about Robert, that he is possibly a tulpa.
Tulpa, that's what it is, yeah.
But yeah, as far as we know, he just really liked this doll. And again, he was 4 years old, so like, you know, a 4-year-old,
Yeah,
a 4-year-old can be really close to a doll. It's not that weird.
That's not that weird.
And Otto's parents,
Especially if everyone's calling you fucking strange and weird
Yeah.
and stuff. It's like, well, you're gonna probably like, yeah, like
probably
close
didn't
around
have a lot of
inanimate
friends.
Object.
yeah,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Otto's parents weren't happy with how connected he was to the doll, and they thought it was strange, but they didn't like stop it or try to stop it. You know what I mean? They're just like, whatever.
that's
He's
good
a
at least.
4-year-old. Just let him be happy with his
Right.
doll.
Good. You know. Okay.
They would see him feeding the doll. They would see him like play feeding, and they would see him like carrying the doll around. They had a pretty large house. Like you go from like upstairs to downstairs to in their courtyard to outside kind of thing with this doll, and he would often talk to the doll. And when they weren't looking, he was almost always whispering into Robert's ears and talking to it in his room.
Okay.
This was seen as innocent at first, until one day when they heard a reply in a deep voice.
Oh, that's hot.
When going into
So he sounds good.
the mom freaked out, ran upstairs, and opened the door to save her kid, saying, "Who are you talking to?" But seeing no one there, Otto just spoke back, "Oh, I was just talking to Robert. That's how he sounds." So
Oh,
that's the first. That's the first paranormal incident involving Robert ever recorded.
That's just what he sounds like. No.
So it's yeah. So the mom apparently thought someone had broken into the kid's room because she heard a man's voice coming from it.
Jeez, that's just what he sounds like.
Yeah.
A man's voice too
Yeah.
is like, I mean,
Yes, Robert.
yeah.
One day the parents would wake up to the sounds of Otto screaming, and when they went downstairs, they saw him in the middle of like the living room with a circle of upturned furniture perfectly stacked around him and crying out loud that Robert did it. and to get him away from Robert.
What the fuck?
That only lasted one night, however, because the next day Otto was back to being attached to Robert the doll's side as much as possible. But as time went on and Otto grew older, Robert would just become more malicious, and the family would find many mangled toys and playthings around the house, like other dolls, their heads ripped off, or other toys that are broken in half, like that kind of thing, almost as if Robert was trying to make himself Otto's only toy.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say, like, as time goes on, jealousy grows.
Yeah. So when young Otto was questioned, the answer was always the same. Robert did it. Robert broke it. Robert put it there.
That almost sounds like a misbehaving kid, for sure, too.
100%. 100%.
Right.
Or a cry for attention.
Exactly, yeah. That sounds like early childhood trauma.
There is another famous story, however, of a plumber who came to work on the house when the family was out. And while he was working, he heard children's laughter multiple times coming from the room. And knowing no one was here, he looked around and only saw Robert. When he went back to work, he heard laughter again, looked back up, and Robert was now on the other side of the room.
Oh, okay.
He kind of freaked out, but thought, maybe I just saw it wrong before. Went back to work downstairs and then heard a bunch of banging sounds and came back up and saw that the items that were previously around Robert were now on the floor at the door side of the room. So the items were launched across the room.
Was Robert in the same place?
Yeah, he was in the same spot, but it seemed like he moved from an empty corner to a corner full of things and threw everything in the corner at the door. It's kind of the what that was getting at. But eventually Otto would grow up, and Otto would have to move away because he went to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago, Illinois.
Hey, there you go, bud.
Despite the trouble caused by the doll, Otto brought Robert with him.
Okay, this is where it's going to get interesting.
Yeah. So, also talking about being described as eccentric would be the college student at a fine arts school with a doll wearing a sailor outfit in his dorm room. But so
I mean, you're at an art school. That's not the weirdest thing. It is an art
school.
There,
You're right. You're right. It is an art school in like the in the 20s too. So it's like a very weird time where art's the bohemian lifestyle was flowing in America.
That's true.
Some speculated that the doll demanded to go with him, but Otto never confirmed this, but he never really denied it either. He would keep Robert with him throughout all of his schooling, as after the Fine Arts Academy in Chicago, he ended up going to the Art Student League in New York, and then he ended up even going to the Parisian Sorbonne University in Paris, France. And he brought Robert with him every time, and at the university in France, he would meet his wife, Anne.
Oh, well, okay, there you go.
So after graduating and getting married to Anne, he would return to Florida and move into the house that he grew up in, which is now abandoned. I don't know. It says abandoned. I couldn't really get an answer. I think what it means is that they still, his parents didn't die, but they probably still owned the house but moved away somewhere.
That was more common back then.
Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly. That's right.
They didn't want to sell it. They just wanted to keep it.
That's exactly what I think happened. They kept it for him to come back to, which he did.
Yeah.
Which is still around today. And when he moved back in, he named the house the Artist House. It even had a sign on it called the Artist House.
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, you can think of a more clever name. I'm just saying.
Well, I actually love when houses get names. I think it's really cool.
Oh, I do too. For sure.
Especially when they have a name plaque on it. Like nowadays, has a plaque on the sidewalk. It says the Artist House.
That's cool.
It's at 543 Eaton Street in Key West, Florida. If you want to go there today, it is actively open as a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
So you can stay there. It's known to be haunted, not by Robert, but it's known to be haunted by probably Robert's friends.
You invited him over.
Yeah. When he moved back in, Otto designated a special room, which would be the attic of the home, to Robert. He filled the room with furniture, toys, and even got the doll his own stuffed toy, which is the dog that he has in the pictures. So yeah, he made a whole room for Robert to stay in. Robert was allegedly not happy with his room, and he would often get out and situate himself on a chair facing out a window from the upstairs balcony. So he was often seen there. But Otto would constantly move Robert back up to the attic.
So it sounds like the spirit was like, you can't just shove me away. Give me a nice little room to stay in and shove me away.
Yeah.
I'm in your life, bitch.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because what I was just about to say is that Otto's wife hated the doll. wanted it destroyed, but knew that Otto would never like be okay with that because he was too attached to it. So she basically just said, give him a room, like lock him up in there. He's creepy as fuck. I don't like being around it. It disturbs me. She said she would feel nauseous around the doll.
Yeah.
So he made that room for it, but it didn't stop him from getting out. And it's known that they got into multiple heated arguments, even in public and around people, about the doll. So it was a big point of contention in their relationship.
That must have been embarrassing.
So
you're an adult. You shouldn't be playing with action figures.
It's my boy. So many passerbys would actually witness Robert. This is where we get a lot of the stories of Robert the doll, because he would be seen in that window looking out, and he would be seen being grabbed from behind aggressively and brought back to the attic sometimes too. So many passerbys would see Robert looking out through the window when he was supposed to be in the attic. They would even say that when they would look at him, look down, and look back up, and he had moved to a different window.
Oh, yikes.
That was a very, very common report that he had been moving windows. And another common report is that his head would turn and follow them as they walked. And it became relatively well known that there was the artist house, the doll in the window. That became like a local thing. You could go see the creepy doll in the window of the artist house. And many people would avoid the house by crossing the street, or even avoid that entire stretch of Eaton Street altogether. Those who ignored the warnings of others would report seeing the doll gaze at them, like we said before, and a lot of people would actually feel unease or nausea being around that house when Robert was looking out the window.
Man, that's just what the wife put up with.
Yeah, all day. Visitors of the artist house who would visit for Otto's parties. He was known for having a lot of parties. You know, he's a fancy artist boy. They're probably orgies, actually, like legitimately, but we don't have guaranteed proof of that. But evidence points that he hosted orgies at his house.
I get it. I do like how you're just like, nah, they're orgies.
Yeah,
they're orgies.
So
sure.
I tried looking up to it because there's stories of people in his house, like and they quoted, they said like his parties, quote unquote. So I tried looking up him as best I could and like his parties, and he was known to have many quote unquote private affairs with close friends and other couples, kind of thing. So like,
oh, you're probably right.
Like,
it was orgies.
Yeah, like orgies or swinger parties, like that kind of stuff. I think he was, if not homosexual, bisexual. So I definitely think that he was into that kind of thing, and his wife was probably okay with it as well, if not the same. So they kind of hosted parties like that. You know, this was like the 60s.
Again, artist school.
Yeah.
That's where you go.
This was like 50s and 60s and 40s. So you had to keep it very under wraps, you know.
Right, yeah, I can't say too much.
So he was known to have parties. But people at these parties actually regularly told him, like, we didn't know you had a kid. And he'd be like, what do you mean? We don't have a kid. He's like, then who's running around the attic?
Oh.
So that was like a very, very common thing, is people would hear footsteps running around the attic, and so I would always be like, no, follow me and look. There's no kid up there, to like show them, not to like call fucking CPS. Be like, no, there's no kid. He'd go open the door and show these guests Robert, who would just be sitting in his chair with his little dog every time in his clean and pressed sailor outfit.
Kicking back and relaxing.
Yeah. But it was constant. People would almost always hear movement and footsteps up in the attic, even furniture dragging sometimes.
Well, he wanted to, move his chair around.
Just decorate, Gotta redecorate, move it up a bit sometimes.
Absolutely.
In 1974, Otto would pass away at the age of 70, and the artist's house would be bought by a woman named Myrtle Reuter. Myrtle Reuter would buy the house. It was fully furnished and purchased. He had no kids, so everything was just left as is. I think his wife Anne died before he did, so when he passed away, everything was just left to the state. So she was able to buy the house fully furnished with everything, including our boy in the attic, Robert.
So she probably was like, oh, I'm going to buy this nice house. Goes upstairs and is like, fucking Jesus.
Yeah, well, actually, Myrtle had a deep connection with Robert. Even allegedly, according to her, deeper than Robert's connection to Otto.
Okay.
Robert never misbehaved around Myrtle. Never caused any problems, but would talk to her at night, apparently. Like, nicely. Like, friendly. So apparently, this malevolent spirit inside Robert really liked Myrtle. And they got on really well. And there was talk of it during this. There was little talk of any incidents involving Robert, especially seeing him in the window. If she was ever home, allegedly, no one saw him in the window. Only when she wasn't home, he would escape the attic and go to the window.
Only way she wasn't home. Okay.
Yeah.
Like she's like Marcy, because Marcy waits for me always at the door when I'm not home.
Yeah, so it's either that or the fact that I behave when she's home and not when she's, you know what I mean? Like I'll misbehave and break out when she's gone, kind of thing.
Right.
And we don't know what happened next. Something happened, however, and in the sometime in the 80s, she had to move out of the artist house, but she brought Robert with her.
Okay.
And we don't know what happened after this either, but in 1994, which is the next time Myrtle would show up and recant this whole story, was to the Fort East Martello Museum to give the doll up to the museum, giving it a storied past, which was verified. People from the area had heard of the creepy doll in the window on Eaton Street in Key West. It was like a known legend to people in the area. So when the museum verified it, they took it. And the museum took the doll in, not really believing any of the stories. But before long, inexplicable things would happen to the staff around the case of Robert, such as things falling or launching out of their own pockets.
Wow. What?
Other things in the area being knocked down. People would feel tuggings on their clothes. The power would flicker. And it became such a story thing amongst employees that it ended up attracting visitors to the museum, because they would tell like their people in life, and their families would come and try to see this crazy doll causing things, and kind of what caused Robert to be popular today.
Right.
So visitors would show up to see the doll on display and often joke about it, and then before long, the museum would start getting letters to Robert, with people praying to him sometimes for his power, or praying to him for blessings and apologizing for begging forgiveness for mocking him in front of him, reporting that something followed them home and was causing horrific nightmares, sleep paralysis, doors slamming, stuff like that in their home. And once the apology was sent off, it always stopped.
I want to go see it.
Let's take a trip to Florida. You can bring MJ, and then we can go visit it.
We'll bring an EMF reader.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know if anyone's actually done that. I think they did on Ghost Adventures. I think they went and saw the doll. Because there is a lot of paranormal disturbances around the doll today. It has received over 1,000 letters to this day and gifts, everything from candy to joints. People really like sending Robert weed.
Maybe maybe that's what he needs. He just needs to calm down with some green, baby.
Maybe he followed him home. He's like, listen, guys, I'm gonna really haunt you and kill you and stuff unless you send me some weed, dude. I'm really fucking losing it, guys. I need something.
And he's just like,
dude.
Yeah. And he's just like sitting on his couch, just like, fucking idiots.
Got it.
Like, dude, if you're a spirit, you could easily manipulate people.
Oh,
you know what I
100%.
mean? You can and get weed
100%.
easy. That's all I would do. I'd be haunt people for weed.
Oh no, it's the Green Ghost. In 2015, a film came out called Robert that was based loosely on the doll. It would release and do well and have 4 entries. So there's 4 Robert movies. I've never seen them.
I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, they're UK based movies. So they kind of, they're different, but they tell the same basic story in the first one, from what I could tell. But then the sequels go off the rails.
Yeah.
Today, Robert has many effects on those who visit him. A common trait is if you have a digital camera and you look at him, it turns off. That happens all the time. People can't get their cameras to work around him.
That's crazy.
Cell phones can take photos of him, but they often come out blurry and sometimes have light spots on the camera, like almost as if it was like a reflection of the glass case he's in, but like amplified a little too high. Cell phones around him will also lose service almost every single time. It's very rare to get any service in the Robert area. Even in the same room, if you step away from him, you'll get service again.
I bet with my new Samsung something with that X something camera, I can get a good picture of him.
That'd be a good ad for them.
I think I nailed it, yeah. Sponsor of Samsung.
So video cameras and digital cameras also often have with full batteries. They'll just display empty battery and shut off when looking at Robert. Some of them even break. There's been reports of battery leaks due to when filming Robert. The battery just leaks out of nowhere and destroys the camera.
Gross.
And taking photos, yeah. Usually, obviously, we have photos of him, so you can take photos of him. But apparently, it takes multiple tries. It's like you have to really try to get a photo.
That's gonna be the only thing I care about if I ever go there, is taking my first photo being like a decent one. Yeah. I mean, the photo in the picture, the one that that's on stream, is great.
Yeah,
it's like a really great
there's
photo.
Plenty of good photos of him.
But But that's probably like the 6th try, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, they never say. There's a whole photo shoot with him, so it's just like, it gets done. But it's just like a common thing people say, like, oh, cameras don't work around him, so.
Yeah, I think Roberts just kind of likes attention because it doesn't seem like he's tried to hurt anybody. Like the whole Annabella stuff, it's just like, oh, he tried to fucking slit some
Robert.
dudes, but like
Robert, of the 3 we're talking today, Robert's my most believable. If I do think that ghosts, I have my own theories about like what I think ghosts could be or whatever.
Sure.
But I've had paranormal experiences. We talked about it before. And I do think that maybe ones could live in objects like this, and I do think it's possible they could have some kind of outreach or potential effect on people, but I don't think they're flying around rooms, knocking stuff down, and
trying to cut people
and trying to crash their cars and motorcycles. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, no, because this one is definitely the more eerie one for sure. Because again, it's just like such subtle things like noises and.
Yeah, and it's also like I kind of like the idea that it has this whole past, like literally the whole 80s. Like we don't know what happened. Like this lady just had Robert, and apparently she was like her best friend, or Robert was like her best friend, and she talked to him at night and stuff. Like, was there full on like ghost weird conversations going on? And this lady just like got lost in it, and then something happened, and she's like, "You need to go," and just fucking gave him to a museum after 14 years,
I don't know.
like or 20 years actually. So it's crazy.
I don't know.
But yeah, that's Robert. That's the whole story of Robert. Go check him out.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah. So our last one is going to be definitely the shortest of the 3 tonight. There's not as much of a story to tell, but it's very interesting, and I wanted to do one that wasn't American. So this time we're going to the other country we talk about a lot on this podcast, which is Japan.
Oh, righty then.
Yeah, we're going across the Pacific to the island nation of Japan, and much like Robert, this third doll is also from the early 1900s. And is also named after its owner. So this is a doll in Japan, and this doll would be bought by a young man in 1918 during the still heavily feudal times of Japan, and like the empire's just kind of starting to take over.
Yep.
And modern technology was just beginning to really take root in Japan. So our story starts with 17-year-old Eikichi Suzuki, who was part of the Japanese Imperial Navy and will be visiting Hokkaido, where he saw a porcelain doll wearing a kimono with shoulder-length raven hair, which I'm going to bring up the picture of now on stream if you want, so you can see that there. It had dark, endless black eyes, and he was captivated by this doll and immediately knew that his 2-year-old sister would love it. So he spent the last of his money that he had with him for this, like spending money for this trip, and bought the doll.
That's sweet of him, at least.
He would bring the doll back home to his younger sister named Okiku, and she apparently her eyes lit up with excitement, and she was screaming with joy and her immediate fascination with this doll, which she would take with her basically everywhere she went after this point. Just like Robert, like she kind of carried Okiku around everywhere. She named it after herself, like I mentioned.
How could this go wrong? This is adorable.
So yeah, she carried this doll around. She was great, super happy little girl. She spoke to it. She sang to it like it was her best friend. She had tea with it and brought it everywhere. She was seen feeding it often when she was having her meal at dinner, and she would often, and just like Robert, we mentioned before, named the doll after herself. And a year later, however, things started to get bad.
Uh-oh.
But this time it wasn't actually the doll that started things to get bad, because tragedy would strike in Japan around the year 1919 when the yellow fever broke out around the country due to Japan opening its borders for the first time. If you don't know, yellow fever is it's a bad fever that nowadays basically needs to be treated with Tylenol, but back then, like, there wasn't much of a way to stop it, and Japan had opened their borders for the first time, so European and African people were visiting, and that's what they think it came from. And kind of
Europeans bring a lot of diseases to places.
Oh yeah. So yellow fever spread across the country and caused a lot of damage. And unfortunately, now 3-year-old Okiku would catch the yellow fever and pass away.
That's sad. That sucks.
It's also said that she died in immense pain as she gasped for air due to her failing lungs. And she grasped a doll in her hands as she passed. And I normally wouldn't say that about a little 3-year-old dying, but I wanted to include it because we're talking about spirits that fuck things up after they're dead, so that might have something to do with it.
Right. Yeah. Like she was so connected to this
Yeah.
thing, she put her energy
Yeah,
into
and
it.
she was
kind of
dying in
thing.
immense pain. Like, that could cause for a fucked up transition to afterlife if that's how it works. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, for sure.
The family planned to bury the doll with their daughter because she was so attached to it, but due to unknown complications and government regulations regarding infected bodies, they couldn't do it.
Oh, that sucks.
So instead, the family placed the doll in as a tribute to Okiku at their family's altar, which, if you don't know, in Japan, most houses have altars in them. They have like their little, shrines dedicated to honor their dead and commemorate their passing to the afterlife, kind of thing.
They're very beautiful.
Yes, I was just gonna say they're very pretty and they're very well maintained.
Yeah.
It's very important to keep them.
Yes.
They keep them pristine, which is important to note for what we're about to talk about. The altars
Right.
are always clean. They light candles on them and stuff like that, so they're well cared for. So the shrine would in turn be made entirely to host the doll. So it was basically the doll was like the center point of the shrine, and it was made entirely to commemorate their daughter's passing to the afterlife, and would be visited by the family in the house every day as they would say a prayer to it and speak to the past daughter, kind of thing.
Of course.
Soon, however, strange things were noticed, generally with the doll Okiku. Firstly, the doll's hair was noticed as becoming frizzy, even though the mother was known to brush the doll's hair every day. It was also noticed that the hair had started to grow beneath shoulder length and would have multiple split ends. Soon, the hair
Maybe
would...
some wear and tear. Time will just do that, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know about growing. That's the weird part. So
Right.
the hair would also become less black and more brown, like the hair of their deceased daughter.
Oh, okay.
At night, the family would start to have dreams of Okiku regularly, and when waking up, they would see the doll watching them from the corner of the room, somehow removed from the shrine. After this,
That's it.
the house no. After this, the house began having full-blown events of paranormal infestation. And a lot of religious in Japanese religion and stuff like that, spirits are a major part of it. So
Right.
it was kind of a crazy thing for them to have this happening. Their lights would go on and off. It was hard to keep candles lit in the house because they'd be blown out almost immediately by nothing. Doors would slide open and slam on their own. Banging sounds could be heard with no one else in the house, across the house, or even in the same room as you. There was multiple reports from guests and the family of hearing whispers at night in the dark, and sometimes full-blown male or female voices in empty rooms.
Oh, okay. More of that.
Yeah, so that happened. They did, however, claim that they liked having the doll, as it was a unique opportunity to speak to the dead. The stories would spread, but the family refused any visitors who wanted to see it simply because of the events, unless they were there to honor the shrine to the daughter. People were trying to basically do early 1920s and 30s paranormal investigations. They said no, get away from us. They refused reporters. They refused any media attention, which to me does add a level of credibility to the story.
Yeah, because they're not going in for the money.
Yeah, they don't want anyone bothering them because it's about their dead daughter, and they don't want any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
They're not trying to profit off of
Yeah.
this. Eventually, in 1938, the family would have to relocate to a different district, but they were worried that the doll would lose its connection due to its proximity of Okiku's grave. They spoke to local priests who agreed to take the doll into a new altar for Okiku in the temple that was local where the body was buried.
Right.
And after hearing the stories that kind of went along with the doll, the priests were even more willing to do it because they kind of wanted to see what would happen
Right.
with this doll. So the priests did notice that the hair kept growing, and it actually became part of the ritual to this day at that temple to cut Okiku's hair. To keep trimming it down. So in some time, I think in the 70s, they decided to test this, and they cut the hair from the doll and sent some into a lab in America to be tested.
Right.
And the report came back saying that the hair was from the head of a human child, likely female.
That's pretty crazy.
So today, the doll remains at its private shrine within Manenji Temple in the town of Iwamizawa in Hokkaido, Japan. The priests, like I mentioned, have to do a ritual of cutting its hair once a month, and they also clean the doll at the shrines, and tourists are able to see the shrine, the doll itself, today. You can go visit it, and they do claim now, actually, the more recent development is that her mouth is slowly opening. And the more people go back and visit, the mouth is more open, and there's even people that have looked in with like zoomed in cameras, and they see that it looks like there's baby teeth growing inside the mouth.
What the fuck?
However,
Yeah.
Pat, any cameras that were looking at it have to get checked on the way out and deleted any footage or photos of it because it is against the respect of the temple to take any evidence of this doll.
I think that makes it less credible.
Agreed. So they do have the photos, like the ones I've posted here up on the stream. You can look up Okiku. It's Okiku. There is photos of it with different hair lengths. Again, this could all just be planted there. There is no way to verify any of this. The hair sent into the lab, but they advertise at the temple as like being the hair. It could have been taken from a kid. We don't know.
Right.
So it's just like...
That's how wigs are made anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like we don't really have any solid evidence of this one. I do think it's a great story, and it's pretty creepy.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
The history of it is verifiable and true with the kid and the family. So that as much we know. But yeah, we can't really verify much, and of course they won't let any evidence really be taken of the doll.
Well...
Yeah.
It does seem like it could be a generational prank dating back, a century.
Yeah, I mean, again, if I definitely think it's possible a 3-year-old died in agony, and if ghosts have to do with that kind of thing, and if agonizing deaths, which many people theorize do involve horrific spirits, that could definitely be the case,
Right.
Which could experience the spiritual infestation that happened at the house,
Yeah, because most of the time... Like you said, because to me, I don't know how much about it is like the genuine consciousness of a spirit being brought from a dead body or a once living body into an object. But but the energy I can definitely see.
That's what I think. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause to me, it's just like you said, she died in a lot of pain and agony. There's actually a lot of energy that produces, like your body when it's trying to heal and it can't, it's actually kind of going a mile a minute, it's like very intense. And that's, and it like, cause it's trying to heal and it can't. And in that moment, unfortunately that the little girl passed away.
Well, I might be wrong with this, but I'm pretty sure pain is about sending electrical impulses. So if you're in extreme amounts of pain, your body is going to be also generating a lot of more electricity than normal. Which is going to, which is what I personally think might be what these spirits, quote unquote, that we encounter are just leftover versions of that or something, So
right, because I agree. Because I find it with everything that I've learned just about the universe and science and energy and mass and matter and stuff that we don't understand. I'm like, there's still enough wiggle room, and there's still marginal enough wiggle room for all these things to be have ounces of truth to them. All the way from the alien space stuff we talk about to the ghost stuff we talk about to the cryptid stuff we talk about. There's always enough of well, we don't know everything. There's always enough of that. And I think that's why these, especially with Robert being, again, I think definitely the most believable.
Yeah, 100%.
Of just and
especially what?
Yeah, it's almost like
in the words of Thor.
Go ahead. No,
in the words of Thor, magic is just science we don't understand yet, and
I do love that line.
That's it's kind of what this whole thing is about. So that's the end of the episode for today's script.
Fantastic.
That's it. We got through 3 dolls, Annabelle, Robert, and Okiku. I hope you guys like listening about it. This is the 2nd episode of the Halloween 2022 season.
I love it.
So if you like listening to the creepy stuff, stay tuned for the rest of this month. We're going to be having plenty coming at you. I hope you guys had a good time. Thanks for listening.